From Reason Alliance Media, this is Season 1, Episode 9, No Apologies. On today's episode, we're learning to stop apologizing for taking up space, speaking out, or simply existing as secular women. Our first segment is an introduction to two new PSF correspondents, Madonna, deHeaux, and Frida Nipple. Next, Bella Constrictor deconstructs advice from a Christian couple's devotional book in another installment of Hisses and Kisses. Then Madonna brings an in-depth segment on the Day Without a Woman protest, including her experience at an event for that day in Washington Square Park. Following that, Frida Nipple introduces us to microactivism, and finally, we find out exactly why Jesus is apparently the answer to every problem. Stay tuned. Welcome to another Meet the New Correspondents segment. We have added two new correspondents to the show, and their names are Madonna deHeaux, we like puns, and Frida Nipple. Oh, another pun. Look at that. I'm really excited to have them on the show. You may have heard them already adding some content to the show here, but we just wanted to do kind of a formal introduction to you, our listeners. So since we did such fun bios last time, let's introduce you first to Madonna deHeaux.
So Madonna is actually Madonna deHeaux. It's probably of French origin. Or faux French origin. No one knows where Madonna deHeaux came from, although it's suspected that just as Aphrodite rose from semen, sea foam, Madonna deHeaux was born of an ocean of unrealistic expectations and double standards. She's been described as paradox incarnate, as yin and yang in one body, as a contradiction that can't possibly exist. She's both the tiger mom and the China doll, the dragon lady and the lotus flower. Whispers carried by the wind call her the exotic jewel of the Orient. Or maybe it was just that guy cat calling her from across the street. Madonna deHeaux found promoting secular feminism when she followed Princess Sparkle Farts and a trail of cheesy puns until she reached their humble spaceship. Initial observations of her eating habits show she seems to derive her life force from intimidating men and copious amounts of food from the ethnic section of the local grocery store. She's also been noticed reacting with violent outbursts to not all men, white feminism, and tone policing. She frequently gives too much information and calls it radical vulnerability.
Very nice. And welcome to PSF. I'm so glad to have you on the show.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here, Miss B. Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. And what are some things that you are interested in talking about on PSF?
Sure. So I think that PSF has a great opportunity to reach out to a community that is very underserved and a community that is generally dominated by white male atheists. So I'm hoping that we will be a voice for the ones who care more about social justice and about feminism and about making space for more voices to be heard within the movement. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to cover topics that our audience members don't get to hear enough about and we'll be able to connect with. And hopefully we'll continue to inspire them to listen to us and feel like they've found a home.
Awesome. I am going to mute real quick because I have no idea what's going on with my dogs. Nope. Okay. They seem fine. I don't know what's going on. Anyways, that was Maggie. She's my dog. And she just, I guess, wanted to have some input right now. So, welcome, Maggie. Next, we have another new correspondent who is going by the name Frida Nipple, which is awesome. Frida, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I certainly can, Miss B. So, I am the daughter of two conservatives from the cold Northwest. Originally named Jane DePlain, I chose my new name when I learned how to think for myself outside of my conservative upbringing. I am a crafter by day, mostly making crochet genitalia, and a social justice warrior by night. Well, truth be told, I'm one all of the time. I spread microactivism and education everywhere from my pun-powered soapbox.
Pun-powered soapbox is great. I think that should be a thing, like a segment about puns.
It should be. Oh, I know. It should be a thing from Miss Andrews' shop.
Yes. I'll have to tell her about that. She would love that. So what are some of the things that you wanted to cover on the show? I know you mentioned microactivism, and I'm really interested to dive more into that in our next episode.
Certainly. So, of course, the microactivism, I would like to get into more intersectional feminism and talk about how to better serve a larger variety of women. So if we can learn about how to be activists for women of color and women with disabilities, people, in fact, because slip of the tongue there, feminism's for everybody, not just women. So that's part of what I'm looking forward to as part of being a PSF member.
Awesome. And it just occurred to me that we should totally pair up and do like a crafting video at some point, or like, I don't know, find crafting for good to do, because that would be a great way to do microactivism.
Yes. There's it's a pattern for a crocheted octopus, and it has these little swirly tentacles that are, well, technically they're arms because it's an octopus, but they help newborn babies because they are squishy and the arms remind them of their umbilical cord.
So, and they're octopi, so that's good.
Fun little octopi.
I think that Mr. Haven just got home. So I'm going to wrap up this segment right now and wait just a moment until everybody settles down because they're hungry. So just a moment. I feel like I should be narrating what they say. That's oh my God. Actually, probably be, Mom hates us. Feed us. Love us. Mom never pets us when you're gone. Which is not true.
But Mom gave me the food. But if I ask you for the food too, I think I'm going to get it.
The cats were so mean. Mom ordered pizza and didn't give us any.
Like a puppy needs a pepperoni fart.
Yeah, right? Ugh. You were taking too long to get inside.
That's what she said.
See, this is why I never stop recording, because stuff like that is going to happen when we think, no, we don't need to record this. Penelope is currently standing on the end of the bed on her hind feet, begging to be loved. It's so cute and ridiculous.
Constrictor here to share some awesome sex and relationship stuff with you this week. As usual, I will start with a trivia question answered at the end of the segment. And today, I am deconstructing another chapter from the Christian Couples Devotional. Our trivia question for today is, what are the different bases used for personal lubricant? So today, we're going to read some more from the Couples Devotional that we read from in the very first Hisses and Kisses. I realized that first time I didn't quite introduce the book very well, so this book is called Devotions for Dating Couples, Building a Foundation for Spiritual Intimacy, and it's written by Ben Young and Dr. Samuel Adams, who have written numerous books together, mostly on dating and relationships within Christian standards. So yeah, it's pretty straightforward, and every so often I just want to go through a little bit of it and deconstruct it a bit, just for fun. We are working on section 1, which is covering the topic of love, and this is chapter 2, First Love. The first paragraph in this chapter is about the author sitting in church and watching a newly engaged couple, necking during the service. And he says they were fused together like Siamese twins. The oblivious couple couldn't seem to keep their hands off of each other. To make matters worse, we weren't in a movie theater or concert hall. We had to witness this inappropriate exhibition of PDA in church. PDA in a church? Lord of mercy. The author thinks this is ironic, that while these two lovebirds were so engrossed in each other, they were clearly missing the most meaningful and significant love experience in life, praising and worshiping God. But thankfully, they decided to leave the service before the author had to say something to them. Between you and me, I think they were probably going to go screw in the basement during the service. So this entire first page is about how if you are a couple, you should never put yourselves before God. And the only reason humans are able to love in the first place is because we feel the love of God. So he says, they were caught up in a private worship service between themselves. We were all created with a built-in desire to worship something or someone. The sentiment here seems to be if you don't channel that desire through your relationship with God, you are failing and will fail in all other relationships. Coming from an evangelical Christian background, I understand these teachings. I understand why they are horrified that there was PDA in church, because it's disrespectful. But I reject the idea that I must reserve my love for God when there is a living, breathing human in front of me who I want to worship. He goes on. Perhaps the strongest temptation you will face when dating is the tendency to worship your partner, or even love itself. Don't get me wrong. I remember the days of worshiping my partner in the back row. It's great, but you must never elevate anyone else above God. I did notice that in this chapter, the word worship is used interchangeably. They mean both a spiritual worship and a physical one. Although I guess this is a good time to mention that he does a terrible job of defining his terms, so really a lot of this is up to interpretation. I really can't wait to figure out how exactly this is supposed to create healthy, close relationships. When I was a teenager, I grappled with the idea that I was supposed to love God. I lamented to my mother that I did not have any feelings towards God whatsoever, and that if I had to choose, I would always choose to love the people in my life first. She offered a roundabout answer, something like, "It's a different kind of love. He just wants us to focus on him daily in the same way that the people you love are on your mind constantly." But this book literally seems to be talking about romantic love. You must be fully devoted to God before you can even consider having a loving relationship with someone else. So the last thing in this chapter of note is when he says, make sure your relationship points back to God, reflects God's love. This is something I have heard over and over again in church circles, but it is so vague and disjointed. God's love is supposedly no strings attached, unconditional. And right here in day 2, there's already a condition to your human relationship. Get close, but don't get too close. The way that God is described in Christianity, especially his love, is so far-reaching and unattainable for a human relationship, but we are told to model our relationships based on the one that God supposedly has with us. I think this is one of those toxic things that really, it's like a chigger, gets underneath your skin and just burrows there and is always in the back of your mind, and you're constantly evaluating your relationship and saying, wow, is this truly unconditional? And like we said last time, that's impossible. There's no such thing as unconditional love. So let's add an undefinable stress onto a young relationship. That will really set a good, strong foundation for the rest of these couples' lives. Alright, so at the beginning of the show, we asked what the different bases used for personal lubricant are. The answer to this one is kinda long, so strap in. One base that we have is silicone. So the pros for silicone-based lubricants are that they are the most slippery, which can make them especially good for anal. They won't degrade latex condoms, they work well in water, and they don't evaporate it as easily as water-based lubricants or saliva. Some of the cons are they can damage silicone sex toys. See, what happens is that the silicone in the lube and the silicone in the toy have a chemical reaction with each other and tend to solidify together. But this does depend on the grade of your silicone toy. If it's truly medical grade and not some hybrid plastic, your lube probably won't affect the toy at all. And some silicone lubes may leave a sticky residue on your body or even after you've washed. The next base is water-based lubricants. The pros of this is that they are widely available, safe to use with latex condoms, and easy to wash off with soap and water. The cons for water-based lubricants are that they tend to evaporate faster than other types, so frequent reapplication may be necessary, and they also don't work as well if you're having sex in water, say in the shower maybe. There's also a hybrid mix between both water and silicone, and some people prefer this to full silicone-based lube because the cons for silicone are minimized. One of the last types of lubricants that you can find are oil-based. Baby oil, unscented massage oil, aloe oil, coconut oil, jojoba oil, olive oil, coconut oil again, apparently, according to my notes. The pros of these are that they may be a good choice for women who are sensitive to certain additives and preservatives, common in water or silicone-based lubricants. They also make sex easier in the water, they're naturally moisturizing, and they last a little longer than the others. The cons for oil-based lubricants are they can't be used with latex condoms at all, since oil degrades the latex, but they are fine to use with polyurethane condoms. And oil can also stain your sheets, so lay down a towel before experimenting. Now here's a couple tips for choosing your lubricant. Always make sure to look at the ingredients on the label of your lube. Many contain glycerin, which can cause irritation in some people. The same goes for parabens, a type of preservative found in many water-based lubes. Parabens also have weak estrogen-like properties, which has fueled concern that they might increase the risk of some cancers. But the evidence is unconvincing. Try to test your lube before intercourse to make sure it works with your body. And that about does it for Hisses and Kisses, the segment where we slither our way through some seriously sexy and slippery topics. Until next time, back to you, Miss B.
Attention, citizens of Earth! It has come to my attention that you do not know what peril lies ahead for PSF, the imagination, truth, justice, and equality without your support.
What do you mean, omniscient narrator?
Quiet, human! The lives of such lovable characters as Princess Sparklefarts, Dr. Wu, the monthly visitor, and that weirdo who sells dildos depend entirely on the generous gifts from you, our patrons.
What's a patron?
Silence! A patron is a person who visited patreon.com/promoting secular feminism and donated their hard-earned cash to keep this show alive. They're the most important part of this world of ours, for we could not exist without them.
Wait, who are these wonderful humans?
Okay, look. I will explain that if you would just give me a moment for my dramatic pauses.
Okay.
Thank you. Now, we have some new rewards now that the show has relaunched, and puny humans like yourself might find them exciting and interesting.
Is it a puppy?
You have interrupted me for the last time, puny mortal. Now then. Patrons should note that we are now releasing weekly episodes, so they will be charged their pledged amount once a week. Those who give $1 per episode will receive bonus content such as extra sketches, extended or uncut interviews, and bloopers, which are hilarious coming from the PSF crew. $2 will get you everything in the $1 level, as well as sex and relationship advice from our very own Bella Constrictor.
Hey, that's me!
Die, human! I'm sure she can give advice from wherever this phaser took her. Now, giving $5 per episode will get you into the writer's room, where you will receive regularly published PSF erotica, short stories, poetry, and more exclusive written content. At $10, you will receive a one-time gift of a $5 gift certificate to Miss Andre's Bathhouse, along with the rewards from all the levels below this. $15 an episode will get you a one-time bonus gift from PSF, and after 3 months, a loyalty bonus gift, a 3-month subscription of beauty boxes from Miss Andrews Bathhouse. And I have to say, I love my Galentine's Day Bathhouse box. Finally, the monthly visitor level. At $25 per episode, you will get all the benefits of the $10 levels and below, as well as a special surprise gift from PSF once a month.
What's in the box?
It's a surprise! Visit patreon.com/promoting secular feminism to become a patron today.
As some of you may have heard, there was recently a Day Without a Woman, as some people have called it, on March 8th, 2017. And it was a protest where women were not going to work, wearing red in solidarity with each other as a response to many different things. But here to kind of clarify that and a response to it, we have Madonna deHeaux.
Thank you for that introduction, Miss B. So here's the backstory and some clarification on the women's strike that happened on March 8th, or the Day Without a Woman. As I understand it, the International Women's Strike USA is the U.S. component of a grassroots movement that formed in October 2016. It was after a series of policy events affecting access to abortions in Poland and Korea and femicide in Argentina during a women's national meeting of some sort that women around the world decided to come together. It includes the participation of women in over 50 different countries who decided to organize these strike actions on International Women's Day. The U.S. organizers in this particular movement have established a platform consisting of 6 key issues, which are listed on their website at womenstrikeus.org. They are an end to gender violence, reproductive justice for all women, cis and trans, which includes the appeal for free abortions and affordable health care for all, labor rights, including equal pay for equal work, and across-the-board $15 minimum wage, maternal benefits, and the freedom to unionize, full social provisioning, which means, as quoted, an expansive restructuring of the American welfare system to serve the needs of the majority, such as universal health care, robust unemployment, and social security benefits, and free education for all. We demand that the welfare system work to support our lives rather than shame us when we access such rights, unquote. Their 5th issue is to establish an anti-racist and anti-imperialist feminism, including solidarity with Black Lives Matter, the struggle against police brutality and mass incarceration, support of refugees, open borders and immigrant rights, and for the decolonization of Palestine. As they quite eloquently put it, we want to dismantle all walls, from prison walls to border walls, from Mexico to Palestine. And their 6th point is environmental justice for all, in which they do mention support of the struggle of water protectors against the Dakota Access Pipeline. So in addition to that, the Women's March, which is short for the Women's March on Washington, they hopped on board as well, and they branded the day a Day Without a Woman, alluding to the Day Without Immigrants protest that took place on February 16th of this year. The Women's March platform, which they call their unity principles, generally overlaps with the International Women's Strike's principles, although I would say that it seems to be slightly less radical in language and also slightly less socialist in language. Additionally, the Women's March platform specifically acknowledges LGBTQIA rights, civil rights, including a call to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which has generally been seen as a second-wave feminist issue, and disability rights. Both of these organizations, the International Women's Strike USA and Women's March, held events in New York on March 8th, with additional actions organized across the country and around the world. As Ms. B said, women were asked to participate either by taking the day off from paid and unpaid labor, to avoid shopping, with the exception of at small women and minority-owned businesses, and to wear red. The Center for American Progress actually has estimated that if all women in the U.S. abstained from paid work for the day, the cost for the U.S. would have been at least $21 billion. And that's not including unpaid labor. I think what was most interesting about the women's strike is that prior to the day, there were a lot of critiques and discussions about the protest actions and whether being able to perform them or not was a reflection of privilege. There were several arguments for why participation could have been seen as being a very privileged action or even in contradiction of the day's goals of demonstrating the indispensability of women. It was criticized for being inaccessible to those who could not afford to take the day off, as well as to those who can't stop performing unpaid labor. For example, if they're the sole caretaker for their children or the elderly, or they subscribe to a non-hetero family structure. Megan Daum of the LA Times argued that women who enter the workforce do so specifically because of the necessity of the economic value that they bring into the household. So if they're able to take the day off, their wages must not actually be of significant contribution. That's the argument that she's basically making. And Maureen Shaw at Quartz wrote an article anticipating that the strike is going to be, quote, mostly a day without privileged women. And she cites an Oxfam America study about how sexism pushes women into low flexibility, low benefit, and low wage jobs, which wouldn't grant them the ability to take the day off. The Women's March FAQ actually specifically responds to this issue of privilege because of, I think, the criticisms that had cropped up around it with this answer on their website. It is evident that the intersecting identities of women mean we experience widely different degrees of privilege or lack thereof. Everyone has a role to play. Women and allies with greater privilege are called to leverage that resource for social good on March 8th. However, everyone's involvement signifies an equal commitment to the day, especially those who experience greater vulnerability to discrimination and exclusion. Even wearing red may be a great act of defiance for some uniformed workers. Another article, this one on The Nation, by Tithi Bhattacharya and Chinzia Aruza, I'm totally butchering those names, suggests that both of those writers have too much faith in the Democratic Party and neoliberalism as a means to fight against sexism. It also notes that there is participation of women in less affluent countries, since there are 50 countries that were participating in the International Women's Strike, and the fact that women of color and grassroots organizers have played a huge role in the leadership of this particular strike. As Magali A. Miranda Alcazar and Kate D. Griffiths, who are also organizers for the International Women's Strike US, write at The Nation. I apparently read a lot of The Nation. The most vulnerable women have been striking all year long. They pay homage to the queer Black women who built the Black Lives Matter movement in their article. They mentioned the women participating in prison strikes through the Incarcerated Workers Organizing Committee, the Standing Rock Water Protectors, who are led by women, and the Day Without Latinx, Immigrants, and Refugees, which was a woman-led strike in Milwaukee that served as the inspiration for the Day Without Immigrants 3 days later. They write, given that so many women with so much to lose from striking are already doing so, perhaps instead of asking what it means for women to strike, we should ask how can we make it possible for more women to strike or keep striking. Another question that a friend of mine raised in a Facebook group chat about feminist allyship places a stress on cost-benefit. At what point is fighting for rights considered a privilege? Only if we feel unthreatened by participating in protest actions. But protest actions in themselves should be a sign of courage because they're done precisely to disrupt the status quo. And that comes with it consequences. Fighting for rights requires sacrifice. So I'm not sure whether we can label striking something that is only for the privileged. And in fact, in my experience, women felt that it was necessary to participate. So I went to the Women's March rally, which was held at 5th Ave and 59th Street near Central Park. That one was just afternoon. I didn't get to hear the speeches, but I did speak with a couple of the women there, a couple of the participants there, and I got some great pictures of some really creative signs that I'm sure we can share with our listeners. I met Gabby and Savannah, who were two sisters holding up a sign that read, "The strongest, most fearless person I know is my mother." They were there with their aunt instead of at school. And I also spoke with a couple of university students who were skipping class to be there. These university students, I really was glad to have seen them there because they had signs that were written in kanji, in Japanese letters. And I find that it's rarer to see Asian American participation or Asian participation in these sorts of protest actions. For example, one of the signs said "Mu Li," which are Japanese characters for girl power, women power. So I thought that was really creative. And a lot of the events on the day of were held on college campuses, like at the New School, for example. I went to a feminist economics lecture held at a New School building that afternoon. In fact, I would really love to bring Catherine Moose, who's an economist and lecturer who led that session, onto the show for an interview.
Yes.
Yeah, she said, I spoke with her briefly after the course and I was like, well, I am part of this podcast called Promoting Secular Feminism. And she did sound like she was interested. So I'm going to grab her for a session about feminist economics at some point.
Sweet.
There were also other sessions I didn't get to attend, but there were so many interesting things going on that day. There was a self-defense course in the morning. There was an introduction to intersectionality. I think there was even a lecture on something with female representation in literature. It was really, really great how many events across different campuses there were. Afterwards, that afternoon, I went to the International Women's Strike Rally and March. That was held in Washington Square Park. The speeches there were incredibly from a very diverse set of speakers, including from a representative of the Red Umbrella Fund, which is the first global fund guided by and for sex workers.
Awesome.
Yay! Right? There was a trans woman union organizer who freely admitted that there were probably women in the crowd who didn't even recognize her womanhood. She was just incredibly self-aware.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm still trying to find that speech because I would love to just share it everywhere. There was a woman who is a mother to a victim of police brutality. There was a woman who spoke passionately about the dangers of Zionism, which is such a controversial topic. It's a perspective that I don't think would have gotten much space at a quote-unquote more mainstream protest. It was just incredibly edgy, and she was so well-spoken. I was very much blown away by the self-awareness and the centering of voices that don't get as much amplification. And there was even a nod to the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire, the anniversary of which was March 25th. We marched past that location, and some of the women at the march had an elaborate display of the names of the women who perished in that fire. They had these t-shirts displayed. And it is said, whether true or not, that the first International Women's Day, which was then known as International Working Women's Day, was held in commemoration of a strike by women garment workers. So I was both at the Women's March in Washington, D.C. and at this strike, and I have to say that they were both inspiring, but in very different ways. The Women's March in D.C. clearly brought out a lot of newly activated women who are now more politically engaged. I like to think also that it fostered a discussion of intersectionality and white feminism. The Women's Strike, or A Day Without a Woman, started to embody more of that intersectionality in what I felt was a less superficial way. Perhaps because the platform of the International Women's Strike US is slightly more radical, but I really enjoyed the day, and I think that this bodes well for the future of feminist activism in the US.
Nice.
That is so good to hear after the criticism that came from the Women's March being so focused on white feminism, that it was kind of saying one thing and doing another, but then to hear that the following one focused a lot more on intersectionality, that's so good to hear that people are listening to these things and responding the way that feminists actually want to be intersectional. Go figure.
I think that we're also, because it's creating more of a nationwide voice, that the spaces are being created for us to be more inclusive, where there's room for these smaller groups to come forward. And because it's a nationwide thing, that's how it's happening. And I love it too, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
That it's really exciting to have younger feminists hearing these messages growing up, so that when they're our age, I say with air quotes because we're not all the same age here, but when they have matured a little bit and start making their own podcasts and things like that, or come on our show, that they will have a better understanding of how intersectionality works and can help feminism sort of evolve into what it will become next to help everybody, not just white women, white cis hetero women, I should say.
Yeah, I was so impressed listening to you when you talked about it just made my little feminist heart happy when you talked about the two sisters who were there instead of at school with my mother's the strongest woman I know sign, or what it was, because I feel like at first that gets a lot of backlash, oh my God, they should have been in school, why are you bringing kids out of school? But if there's anything worth missing school for, I would say that it's, teaching your children that it's okay to show up, and it's actually expected to show up for protests and for activism and for things that you believe in and issues that are going to affect them in the future. So that just made me so happy to start them young.
That's so true. I wish I had that kind of exposure when I was younger to activism. I feel like I was socialized to be very obedient.
I was as well. Yeah.
And seeing that is just, it is really inspiring for the future. We know that they're going to have more of a voice than we do, or they're going to have a voice earlier than we did, and more confidence in that voice.
Yeah, nothing makes me happier than seeing young women realizing that they are allowed to take up space at a young age. It's just, I'm digging it, man.
And to not apologize for your existence.
Yes.
To not say sorry at every given opportunity, to just put yourself out there and go, I'm here, deal with it.
Yes. Yes, that's so
Exactly.
great.
Yeah, there were so many women with strollers and with their kids there, and not just girls. There were boys there as well. There were people who probably don't know yet, and of other genders. So it was really fantastic.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love women taking their children to something like A Day Without Women, because that's just so symbolic to me of, you know, how it's like seen as the woman's job to always be a caretaker for children. So even in a day like without her, she still has this child like attached to her. Does that make sense? Or am I making this like the English major in me is coming out and I'm like reading into it too much? But I just really love seeing like women normalizing like public motherhood.
No, that totally makes sense, because I mean, even though some of the actions included to refrain from unpaid labor, you can't really step away from motherhood, I would say.
Yeah.
And so
that, I would say that's like the biggest form of unpaid labor that we have. I think I read something about when you add up all the cost of taking care of a child and like all the labor put into taking care of a child, then most women who are stay-at-home moms would be making something like $50,000 a year, which, you know, that would obviously change based on your location and things like that. But it really is such an misunderstood, I guess, form of unpaid labor.
And that's the reason also why things like childcare can be undervalued, because there's a component of it that is emotional, that is love-based. And so how can you put a value on love? It basically is, people use that as a way of discounting the amount of money or economic value that is attributed to these sorts of labor, because they think that, oh, this person is doing it because they're passionate about it or because they love doing this, so we don't have to pay them as much to encourage them to do this. Even though its economic value is just as high. So I think that's part of why nonprofit work also, a lot of nonprofits get away with paying their employees less because they know that their heart is set in that work. And I think it's a problem across many different fields, but particularly in fields that women tend to dominate in. I mean, there's a variety of reasons why those wages are depressed, but that's one of them.
Oh my gosh, there's a book that I read last year. It's called The Globalized Woman, and it was basically talking about the value of women's, unpaid work. And I'm sure there are several books about this kind of thing, but it was so eye-opening to me as a woman who, does not have children, grew up in a household with a sibling. So the household work was split pretty evenly, and I am privileged enough to be going to college and to not have been married off to someone or sent to work as a maid in someone's house at the age of 16 or something like that. So I'll see if I can find it and post like the author in the show notes, because that was one of the best books that I read last year.
There was a documentary, I think it was on Netflix, and it was talking about lifting up women in different countries, and they featured, I think, at least 3 or 4 different countries, and how women were taking actions to help improve their circumstances, and how when you have women that are taking an active role in their society, that it makes the country better as a whole. And that's something America desperately needs.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
The book I was talking about, sorry, I just now Googled it. It's The Globalized Woman, Reports from a Future of Inequality, and it's by Krista Victoric. something like that. I think it was originally published in German, so I'm going to go with Victoric. But yeah, brilliant book. Highly recommend to all listeners.
And we can put the information for that book in the show notes. Also, the speech that was at Washington Square Park, I am looking all over for that, but I cannot find a video of that either. No. So if our listeners find the speech at Washington Square Park, definitely send us the link, because we'd love to share that with everybody else.
Yeah, there were a couple of hours of really, really great speeches, and I am forgetting a lot of them, but they were from extremely, usually marginalized voices that do not get such a large platform. So if any listeners find any of those speeches, that would be great. I have really terrible audio recording, video recording, live video recording of part of the Black Lives Matter movement speech and part of a speech by, I think, a nurses union on my Facebook, but those are the only ones I have.
We'll be on the lookout for more of those videos, because I would love to hear some of those speeches. Mm-hmm. But I am sure that we will hear some interesting speeches at ReasonCon, which is coming up.
Oh.
And
woot woot.
Hopefully we can get some more activism going with Frida talking to us about microactivism this week and next week. So we will let our listeners know how they can get involved. No matter their abilities, we'll figure out some way for you to resist. That seems like a pretty good place to end there. But if you have anything else to add or any questions, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I work at a call center, which is occasionally referred to as a pink collar job.
Oh, yeah. Like women work in it mostly, right? That's
right.
Yeah.
And we've talked about if we could manage to go on strike for a day, that it would essentially completely shut us down.
Yeah, I was in surgery on the day without a woman, and if there had not been any women at the hospital where I had been, I would have been in so much trouble. I did have a male nurse, though, which was the first time I've had a male nurse. He was pretty cool.
Interesting.
But yeah, there were a ton of women, because there are a lot of women in nursing, and also my physician's assistant is a woman. So I basically would have had a surgeon, and that's it.
Yeah.
And one nurse.
Yeah,
in the whole building.
Thank God that they were not, or the flying spaghetti monster, whatever. I need to start working on my colloquialisms. That they were there to make sure you survived your surgery. It was pretty awesome.
Yes.
I was on a volunteer trip, so I also did not participate in the Day Without Women, or Day Without a Woman. I was volunteering with Goodwill of the Valleys in Virginia, and I really enjoyed that work. And I also noticed that there was one man volunteering there, and there were about 18 women, something like that. So
wow.
Yeah, that as well. And it was we were volunteering with Goodwill and with SIRCAP, which is like a program that brings water to rural areas in the South and economic development and things like that. So very, really important work. And I do feel like it kind of would fall apart without women.
Yeah. A lot of nonprofit work would fall apart without women too. I imagine.
Women.
It certainly seems that our government has fallen apart without women.
Huh. Wow.
Go figure.
Yeah. Good point.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, goodness. Well, I think that's a pretty good place to wrap up here. Thank you so much for putting this together. It's a really great discussion, and I am looking forward to talking more about activism that we've seen others do, as well as how we can participate in activism. So I will see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Where's the best place to meet your online friends? Where's the best party where the fun never ends? Where will Bobby Carey be our MC too? I bet you'd go if you only knew. It's ReasonCon, it's ReasonCon in Hickory, North Carolina. It's ReasonCon, it's ReasonCon, and the speakers couldn't be finer. We've got Matt Dillahunty and Aaron Ra.
Callie Wright and Lawrence Krauss. We've got god-awful movies coming to you live. And Jim Craig and Shelley Siegel really jive. It's Reason Con, it's Reason Con. Meet the people in your favorite podcasts. It's Reason Con, it's Reason Con. The conference where you'll have a blast.
Merriam-Webster defines activism as a doctrine or practice that emphasizes direct, vigorous action, especially in support of opposition to one side of a controversial issue. Direct, vigorous action. Who the fuck can manage that? Some days, sure, you might have the time and resources to get yourself out there, as it were. But what if you can't? Let us redefine activism as any deliberate action taken to affect social change. This opens the door to be inclusive of people who make differences in the small steps that they take, what I refer to as microactivism. Here are some small steps for microactivism. You can state your position. For example, I'm against circumcision. It's genital mutilation and shouldn't be done. What this does is let people know where you stand, that something needs to be done differently, and if a person needs support for that issue, they know that you support them. You can give others an action step. When you see a post talking about how something is so wrong, and this shouldn't be happening, don't just repost it. See if there's already a plan to help. You can share that link in a comment, and also share that link if you repost. For example, there's the Flint water crisis. Flint, Michigan still doesn't have clean drinking water. There's the Flint Water Fund, a United Way of Genesee County, that they are giving support. So anytime that I see that post, I share that link. You can give bite-sized education. These are little snippets that are in the moment that fit a situation. For example, I had a group of friends that were planning on going out to the bar, and they had the usual plan. If a guy asks me for my number, I can tell him I have a boyfriend. I let them know, you can just say no. You don't need to have an explanation. Your answer isn't any less valid just because you're single. You can also tell other people what you're doing. And by this, I don't mean brag or get in other people's faces about it. You can say, I'm volunteering at a soup kitchen and it's really important to me. Or, I'm making an effort to change my language to avoid sexist terms. Or, I'm participating in a podcast talking about social justice issues. People will see what you care about, what things are important enough that you take the time and energy to put together. You never know. By a simple discussion, you could inspire someone to take steps too.
Hello, it is Charlotte Foster Kane here again, president and founder of Parents and Families Fighting the Feminist Threat, or PFT. It is our mission to promote and defend the God-ordained institution of the family from the evils of liberalism, feminism, and higher education. We believe in old-fashioned values, biblical values, and the values that never change regardless of what the perversities of science or reality tell us. Today, America is spiraling into a maelstrom of moral depravity, the likes of which have not been seen since the heyday of Sodom and Gomorrah. We believe that Planned Parenthood is a fundamental part of that depravity. We brought you the Planned Victorian Parenthood and Christian Apothecary Services, or PVCAS, which has been a resounding success, in that we have crippled the abortion industry, made it almost impossible for women to control their own bodies, and have made life as miserable as possible for those impoverished or needy to acquire the kind of fundamental health care that the white and the wealthy take for granted. Praise Jesus! Today, I am happy to tell you about our newest endeavor. We here at PFT believe that nothing is as important as our children, and their education is our top priority. In that light, we have created a new education system to replace our outdated and communist and satanically liberal education system that the United States has been plagued with for over 100 years. It is our proposal that the current education infrastructure be completely dismantled in favor of a new system designed by our own Christian educational experts. This system, which fixes all of the fundamental flaws in the secular education system, which is not only expensive, but also designed to indoctrinate our children into the atheistic, tree-fornicating, liberal madness pushed by the satanic forces of science and reason. We propose the National Jesus is the Only Answer You Need homeschooling system, or deHeaux. This system can be implemented for free, at no cost to anyone beyond a copy of the King James Bible. Instead of paying exorbitant taxes, which create a terrible strain on the job-creating class, deHeaux puts the responsibility of teaching back where it should be, solely on the parents of that child. This system was carefully designed not only to be cost-effective, but also to be simple and clearly understood by every child regardless of their ethnicity, skin discoloration, or poverty level. The National Jesus is the Only Answer You Need homeschooling system has one answer and only one answer to every question that the child and society in general ever need. And that answer is, of course, Jesus. Let us take toddlers, for instance. Why is the sky blue? Jesus is why the sky is blue. Where does the rain come from? Jesus is where the rain comes from. Why did my puppy have to die? Jesus made your puppy die. You see, it's just that simple. What is the letter that comes after H in the alphabet? Jesus. What is that color? Jesus. What is 1 + 1? Jesus. The single and only answer to every question your child could ever have is right in front of you. If you're looking at a painting of Jesus, you know the one with the long blonde hair and the Aryan blue eyes. That one? He's so dreamy. Jesus is the only answer you'll ever need, even for basic reading, writing, and arithmetic. Who wrote Moby Dick? Jesus. How do you spell apple? J-E-S-U-S. Which process do you use first in a mathematical formula? Addition or multiplication? Neither. The order of operations is, please excuse my dear Aunt Jesus. This singular answer can be learned by anyone at any time, and you don't have to build schools, provide lunches for poor kids, or babysit scary children who have a different skin color than yours. Unless your own kid has a different skin color, and then it's your fault for breeding outside your race. And why is it important to keep the white race pure? That's right. The answer is Jesus. This system allows us to answer questions which have, up until now, boggled the secular mind and stumped science and philosophy. What killed the dinosaurs? Jesus smote them so hard. And/or they never existed, and the bones are merely a trick placed there by Satan, but let's keep it simple, the answer is Jesus. What is the sound of one hand clapping? This is no longer a rhetorical question used to inspire deeper thought and meditation because the question has a simple answer. Jesus is the sound of one hand clapping. Jesus is the sound of all clapping. Jesus is the only sound. Jesus. Why is there something instead of nothing? Jesus. Why did little Timmy die of cancer? Jesus. Why is my mother an alcoholic? Jesus. Why is my dad addicted to Scandinavian midget porn? Jesus. How did we evolve from monkeys if we still have monkeys? We didn't. But if we did, the answer would be Jesus. That may be fine for lower education, but what about higher education? No more worrying about prepping for college. Our colleges will all be fundamental Christian colleges as well, and as long as the kid answers Jesus on everything, then they may get into any private Christian school they can afford. Also, we're doing away with grants, and loans will now cost 7 to 12 times as much as they used to. Why? Because of Jesus, silly. Children will learn the one and only important thing with this answer, and that is Jesus. Jesus will grab the wheel and drive the car. Jesus will guide the hand of the brain surgeon, the oil painter, the chef, and the secretary of education. Jesus will supply your children's lunches or not. Jesus will identify early warning signs that you're abusing them and report that to his Father so he can send you to hell later. Or not. Jesus will watch your children as they complete physical fitness challenges and award whatever he feels you are worthy for doing all of those push-ups and burpees. Jesus will teach your children to jump rope and to wipe their behinds. deHeaux is the solution to our education dilemma in this country and the answer to all of our problems. Here at PFT, progress is a 4-letter word, and you'll never be able to tell us different because Jesus is the only answer we need and the only answer you'll ever get.
Thanks for listening to PSF, Promoting Secular Feminism. If you'd like to find more episodes, you can find them on iTunes, Spreaker, Stitcher, our website, which is promotingsecularfeminism.com, our Android app, which you can find on the Google Play Store, or you can plug our RSS feed into your favorite podcasting app. You can find us on social media at facebook.com/promotingsecularfeminism. At Twitter, we are at Secular Feminism, or you can search for us on Instagram and Tumblr. You can also contact us at promotingsecularfeminism@gmail.com. And if you like what you hear, you can support us on Patreon by subscribing and donating a certain amount per episode, and you'll get bonus content, early access to episodes, and all kinds of fun rewards. You can also make a one-time donation via our new PayPal button on the bottom of our website, or if you can't support us financially, you can also help us out by giving us 5-star ratings or reviews on iTunes or wherever you listen to this podcast. I really love Callie Wright's message of love and encouragement on her show, The Gaytheist Manifesto. So with her permission, I've decided to change how we end the show here at PSF. So here goes. You matter. You don't have to apologize for being who you are, breathing air, taking up space, using your voice to speak out, or simply existing. Don't be embarrassed to care passionately about something that's important to you. That's why this podcast even exists, because I care about this and I care about you. Whether or not you think that there is such a thing as a cohesive secular community, you are not the only woman in it. And finally, if you are stuck in religion because of your obligation to your family, it's okay. Most of us have been there, and we're here if you want out. If you need someone to talk to or you need help, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at promotingsecularfeminism@gmail.com.